All right, everyone, and we're not on the record yet. All right, everyone. It's the court's understanding that the jury has reached a verdict. There is not to be any outbursts in the courtroom. I understand that emotions can run high in cases such as these and in many cases that appear in felony court, but no outbursts because whatever the verdict may be, if there's testimony that is needed and if you make an outburst in this courtroom, you're not going to be here for it and you're not going to be able to give testimony. Does everyone understand? And we want to make sure that the deputies in this courtroom don't have an even more difficult job. Does everyone understand? All right. Just one moment. We're going to go on the record. And 2022 CR 4932B, State of Texas versus Oscar Martinez. Can I have parties re-announced for the state?
Daniel Escobar and Hank Wilkins for the state.
For the defense? And are you Mr. Martinez? All right, let's bring the jurors in.
All right, for the jury.
Everyone, please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the court's understanding that you've reached a verdict. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you've reached a verdict on all counts?
Yes.
And is it unanimous on all counts? All right, if you'll hand the verdict form to Deputy Laura, please. Thank you. All right, count one. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of the offense of felony murder as charged in count one. Count two. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of count two. Count three. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of aggravated robbery. Would anyone wish to have the jury polled?
The defense would request that.
All right, ladies, you may be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you if this is your verdict for all counts. If it is, respond yes. If it is not, respond no. Does everyone understand? All right, so we'll start here. Is this your verdict
Yes,
to all counts?
well, that took the two and then the one. Yeah, well, this will be all.
All right, so let's do it this way. To count one, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count one?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count one? Is this your verdict to count one?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count one?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count one? Is this your verdict to count one?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count one?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count one? 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 To count two, is this your verdict to count two? Is this your verdict to count two? Is this your verdict to count two?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count two?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count two?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count two? Is this your verdict to count two?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count two?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count two? 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 Is this your verdict to count three? Is this your verdict to count three? Is this your verdict to count three?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count three?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count three?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count three? Is this your verdict to count three?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count three?
Yes.
Is this your verdict to count three? 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 All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to have Deputy Laura take you back to the jury room, and then we'll bring you back out shortly. Everyone, please rise for the jurors. All right, everyone, please be seated. All right. Oh, we're not on the record. So, can you mute us, please? All right, let's bring the jury in.
All rise for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the second phase of the trial. State, do you have any opening statements?
Just a brief one, Judge. By your decision, you are holding Oscar Martinez accountable. You're making sure that he takes responsibility for his own actions, specifically for the death of Enrique Bocanegra, for setting off this chain of events that led to 2 people dying. And now the state's aware that you found him guilty on Enriquez, but again, we want to remind that Chris also did lose his life during the course of this. And we're not here today without Oscar playing a role. You're going to hear from several witnesses, both from the state and the defense. You're going to hear from one of Mr. Bocanegra's family members about how his passing has affected the family. Can't speak for what you're going to hear from the defense, but what I'd ask is throughout this punishment phase that you remember the objective here is to hold Oscar accountable. Thank you.
All right, defense, any opening statements?
No, Your Honor, we'll reserve.
All right, state, call your first witness.
Your Honor, we call Amy Hildebrand.
All right, if you can raise your right hand for me, please. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. All right, you can lower your hand. Make sure you keep your voice up so members of the jury and the court reporter can hear. If you'll state your name for the record.
My name is Amy Hildebrand.
All right, state.
Ms. Hildebrand, can you tell the jury, how did you know Enrique?
So, Enrique was my uncle. My cousins and I grew up together. We are the 3 Musketeers.
And so, oh, sorry.
We were all born. Sorry. We were all born a month apart. So our parents, we all hung out together a lot.
And so Enrique was your mom's brother or your dad's brother?
So for clarification purposes, my grandmother has a very large family. She's one of like 10 siblings. And her sister was actually Enrique's wife. But again, she was on the younger side of the 10. So when she had kids, it was at the same time that my grandmother's kids had kids.
And what was Enrique like?
Loyal to a fault. Almost too loyal. Strong. Funny. Kind. And just genuinely one of the most loving people I have ever come across in my entire life.
What types of things did Enrique like to do?
When we were younger, he had a Bronco. He had an old school Bronco, and he used to take my cousin out on rides. My cousin liked to hang on to the tire of the Bronco in the back, and they used to ride up and down the driveway. Sometimes they'd take it out of the street, but he loved to do that. He loved to sit there and watch TV while we all played loteria. He loved to sit outside and watch us play football because I was the only girl on the three of us. So he would sit there and he would tell the boys to stop getting so ratty with me, and then we'd go and we'd buy bread and we'd sit there and eat our bread and drink our coffee.
Can you tell the jury, how has Enrique's loss affected your family?
We lost someone who was too good for this world. And that's the only way that I can explain him. I know that you guys have heard that bad things happen to good people. This was him. And he was innocent. He didn't deserve this. We have lost sleep over the past 2.5 years. We've lost someone who, like I said, was extremely dependable. Someone who we could count on to make us laugh, or someone who we could who would just listen to us. We would show up randomly, and even if my cousin wasn't there, even if my aunt wasn't there, he would just hear us talk. And it just saddens me that yesterday my family didn't get to say Happy Father's Day to him. They had to say Happy Father's Day to a gravestone. They didn't get to shower him with gifts. They don't get to call him and ask him how his day went. Or tell him, Dad, I've just had a really shitty day. I need someone to talk to. We lost someone grandiose. Someone who was truly larger than life. And we've not slept because of it.
Thank you so much. I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Defense.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. State, call your next witness.
State rest, Your Honor.
Defense, do you have any opening statements?
No opening statements, Your Honor. We called Irma Martinez.
All right, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand. Make sure you keep your voice up so that members of the jury and the court reporter can hear. If you'll state your name for the record.
Irma Martinez.
All right, defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Martinez. You're Irma Martinez. How are you related to Oscar?
He's my son,
Okay. And how old is Oscar?
21.
Where has Oscar been for the past 2.5 years?
The Bexar County Jail.
Ever since this shooting took place on February 21st, 2022?
Correct.
Okay. And who are these people behind Oscar here?
All of our family, and still some missing.
And is your husband here?
Dad is here, and brother, his grandparents, his aunt, his cousins.
How many siblings does Oscar have?
He also has one in heaven and 2 at home.
Let me ask you this. Was Oscar born in San Antonio?
Yes,
Okay. Did he go to school here in San Antonio?
yes, sir.
What high school was he attending?
He was at Por Vida Academy and he graduated. And while he was here, he also got a diploma, his GED. And I asked him, babe, why did you get your high school diploma? Why did you get a GED? You already graduated high school. We didn't even know he was going to school. He surprised us. And he just said, he wanted to do something with his time.
So while he was in jail, he got a GED
Yeah.
despite having a high school diploma. You keep in regular contact with Oscar?
I do.
Okay. Phone calls, I'm assuming?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Has Oscar ever been convicted of a felony in this state or any other?
No, sir.
If the jury assesses a sentence on the aggravated robbery charge of 10 years or less, he could be eligible potentially from the jury for probation. Do you think he would be a good candidate for probation?
Yes, I do.
And why is that?
These past 2.5 years that he's been incarcerated, he's told me multiple times that he wish he wasn't there. He was actually trying to change, he wanted to go into the service. And he was actually working on that prior to this incident. He's not a bad kid.
You were here for the trial, Ms. Martinez, correct? The whole trial?
Yes, sir.
You saw Oscar's interview with Detective Morales.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall Detective Morales saying, something about joining the service?
Correct.
Okay. What branch of the service was he looking into, or did he decide?
Initially, it was going to be Marines, but and then it was Army.
If he was placed on probation, well, let me back up a second. On count one, the murder charge, it's not probation eligible. You either get 5 to 99 or life. It's a number that has to be done by the jury. But on the second one, the aggravated robbery, there's the potential for probation after he gets out of prison. Do you believe that he has the family support to, if once he gets out of prison, to be on probation, that the
Yes,
family
sir.
would help him?
He's had our support 110% all along, and he will continue.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. I'll pass the witness.
State,
Ms. Martinez, my name is Hank Wilkins. I'm one of the prosecutors here with the DA's office. If I ask you anything that you don't understand, or if I ask it in a confusing way, let me know and I'll rephrase it, okay? So, do you respect the jury's verdict in this case?
I do.
You do. You said that Oscar finished high school, right?
Correct.
And what he was thinking about joining the service, or can you tell us more about that?
He took that ABS test a few times and he had failed. So he was practicing till he was able to pass it.
Thank you, ma'am. No more questions, Your Honor.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
all right, you may step down. Defense,
Your Honor, we have no further witnesses. Defense would rest.
state, do you rest?
Resting, Judge.
And defense, do you close?
Rest and close, Your Honor.
All right, could I have both parties approach? And please speak in the mic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the evidence that you're going to hear for this phase of the trial. I'm going to read to you what's called the charge of the court on punishment. You will receive this back with you in the jury room when you're ready to deliberate. Members of the jury, by your verdicts returned in this case, you have found the defendant, Oscar Martinez III, guilty of the offense of murder in count 1 and guilty of the offense of aggravated robbery in count 3. It is necessary that the jury assess the punishment for these offenses. You are instructed that the punishment for murder is confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Institutional Division for life or for any term of not more than 99 years or less than 5 years. Therefore, you will assess the punishment of the defendant at life or any term of not more than 99 years or less than 5 years in count one. You are instructed that the punishment for aggravated robbery is confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Institutional Division for life or for any term of not more than 99 years or less than 5 years. Therefore, you will assess the punishment of the defendant at life or any term of not more than 99 years or less than 5 years in count three. In addition to imprisonment, an individual found guilty of the offenses of murder and aggravated robbery may be punished by a fine not to exceed $10,000. And if you choose to assess a fine in addition to imprisonment, you will assess such fine and so state in your verdict in each count. If you assess a fine, it is not paid to the victim or victims, if any, but is paid into the registry of the court. With regards to count three, the defendant in this case has applied on written sworn motion for community supervision, stating, among other things, that he has never been convicted of a felony in this or any other state. Our statute provides that where a defendant is found guilty of aggravated robbery and the jury assessed the punishment of not more than 10 years, and they further find that the defendant has never been convicted of a felony in this or any other state, the jury may, within its discretion, recommend community supervision during the good behavior of the defendant. If the jury does recommend community supervision on count three, it will be granted by the court. If there is any evidence before you that the defendant may have previously committed an offense or act of misconduct other than that for which you have convicted him, you are instructed that this evidence, if any, was admitted to assist you, if it does, in determining what sentence is appropriate in the case at hand. You may consider that evidence in assessing punishment only if you first believe, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant committed such other offense or act of misconduct, if any. In the event you have a reasonable doubt as to whether any other such offense or act of misconduct was committed, or as to whether the defendant was involved in such other offense or act of misconduct, then you will wholly disregard the evidence, if any, which may relate to any such matter. You are instructed that the defendant may testify in his own behalf if he chooses to do so. But if he elects not to do so, that fact cannot be taken by you as a circumstance against him, nor prejudice him in any way. The defendant has elected not to testify in this punishment phase of trial, and you are instructed that you cannot and must not refer or allude to that fact throughout your deliberations or take it into consideration for any purpose whatsoever. In your deliberations, you may consider evidence introduced during the guilt phase of the trial, as well as any evidence introduced at the punishment phase of the trial. Under the instructions herein given, it will not be proper for you in determining the penalty to be assessed to fix the same by lot, chance, any system of averages, or any other method than by a full, fair, and free exercise of the opinion of the individual jurors under the evidence admitted before you. The length of time for which a defendant is in prison may be reduced by the award of parole. Under the law applicable in this case, the defendant will not become eligible for parole until the actual time served equals 1/2 of the sentence imposed, or 30 years, whichever is less. Eligibility for parole does not guarantee that parole will be granted. It cannot accurately be predicted how the parole law might be applied to this defendant, because the application of that law will depend on decisions made by parole authorities. You may consider the existence of the parole law. You are not to consider the manner in which the parole law may be applied to this particular defendant. Suitable forms are attached hereto for your verdicts, if you should care to use the same. However, such forms are not intended to influence you in any way in arriving at your verdicts. In any event, each verdict must be unanimous, in writing, and signed by your presiding juror. Respectfully submitted, Judge Stephanie Boyd, 187 District Court, Bexar County, Texas. Suitable forms are attached. State, you may proceed.
Your Honor, we reserve our time.
All right, defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for your careful and your consideration of all the evidence, all the facts in this particular case. We respect your verdict, and now you have to do the punishment part, okay? Let's talk real briefly. Count one is the murder count, all right? You have to come up with a number between 5 to 99 or life, all right? with count 3, the aggravated robbery, because Oscar's never been convicted of a felony in this state or any other, he's eligible for probation if you give him a sentence of 10 years or less. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the things on here that confuses jurors is about the fine. Once again, the judge told you, fine doesn't matter. The fine doesn't go to the victim's family. It doesn't go to, it goes to the state of Texas, the court in general, okay? And when you're in prison, you really don't have the money to pay for a fine, all right? So don't worry about the fine. If you want to do a fine, do a fine. If not, don't worry about it, okay? Let's talk a little bit about the facts of this particular case. All right. We know that Oscar Martinez did not pull a trigger in this particular case. You have found him responsible as being a party. Okay. We understand that. And you guys have gone through days of understanding the exact circumstances of February 21st, 2022. Okay. While he didn't pull the trigger, you found him responsible. But this particular murder, this aggravated robbery, or let me just say, this particular murder is not your typical murder. It's not where husband pulls out a gun, shoots his wife, kills her. That's the type of case where you're doing 40 years to life. All right. All right. A drug deal, kind of a little bit similar to our circumstances, but not exactly. You know, drug deal goes bad, somebody pulls out, shoots a gun, intentionally knowing to shoot that person and kills them. All right. That's something where, I mean, a judge consider anywhere from 20, 30, 40, something like that. In our particular case here with Oscar, I'm going to respectfully recommend that you consider a sentence in the 5 to 10 year range. Why do I say that? Well, number one, we know that Jerry Ortiz's gun was because of Jerry Ortiz, that's why 2 people are dead. All right. I understand the concept of law of parties. You understand the concept now of law of parties. All right. You are holding Oscar accountable for his actions. All right. He has been in the Bexar County Jail for 2.5 years, since February 21st of 2022. He's been doing his time. He doesn't have the ability to bond out. He's been doing his time there. Okay. But if you punish him on count 1, the murder, in the 5 to 10 year range, all right, I'm going to recommend on count 3 that you consider the 5 to 10 year range as well. Okay. Because he's also probation eligible. What does that mean? So if he does his 5 to 10 years over here, number one, he's got to do half the time before he becomes eligible for parole. So if you give him 10 years on the murder, he absolutely has to do half of that, 5 years before the parole board considers letting him out on parole. Doesn't mean it does not a guarantee, as the judge told you in the jury charge, not a guarantee he's getting out, but they start considering him for parole at that point. Okay. So let's say he gets, well, I'll just put a number out there, 10 years. All right. If he gets 10 years and after he gets out on parole, all right, then potentially if you give him probation on the aggravated robbery, he can continue to be monitored on probation. All right. That might be a situation where, not only does he get a punishment, but he also continues to be monitored. So the community can feel like, okay, he's being monitored. If he messes up, he could be revoked on his probation and go back to prison for aggravated robbery up to 10 years at that point. All right. So it kind of protects the community. And, I don't think he's going to be a problem, but we never know what the future holds. But if he's on probation, he continue to be monitored. If he messes up, then fine, he's going back to prison for the aggravated robbery. All right. So my respectful opinion to you is they should be assessing the 5 to 10 year range. You guys talk amongst yourselves, figure out what number you can come up with. Okay. Because remember, he didn't pull the trigger in this particular case. Was he hanging with the wrong crowd? Yes. Should there be consequences for that? Yeah, there should be consequences for that. But remember that Jerry Ortiz didn't get a punishment at all. He walked away from it. All right, so this is a little bit about fairness. Now, I know, understand the law told you, and the judge told you in the previous jury charge, doesn't matter if Jerry Ortiz's case is dismissed or there was a couple of other phrases, rejected or whatever it was. You know, that doesn't mean that Oscar can't be found guilty. Here, you're finding him accountable, but at the same time, look at the equity of it, okay? Jerry Ortiz has walked free of this. Juan Mejia, and Jeremy Martinez on his juvenile charges walked free of this. Joshua got prison time on it, all right? And we don't know about Juan Mejia, his juvenile charge. I can only imagine pretty similar to what happened with Jeremy Martinez's juvenile case. But this is the type of case where you're finding him responsible, holding him responsible, but it should be this young man who's 21 years old. He still has the ability to have a life where he's a productive member of society, okay? He's still young. He will get out one day, hopefully, but we don't believe this type of case, and you've heard the facts and circumstances of everything over the past couple of days, doesn't merit a sentence of 20 years or 30 years or 40 or whatever the prosecution is going to ask. They're going to give you a number of what their recommendation is. I think that's just too high, okay? So for fairness and equity, we're going to ask that you go into the 5 to 10 year range. And then on the aggravated robbery, 5 to 10 as well, but give them probation. All right. Once again, the fines, give them a fine, don't give them a fine, doesn't matter. Don't spend more than 2 minutes thinking about that. All right. Additionally, and I want to address this, Enrique Bocanegra's family, and I told you, you know, it's a tragedy. It's tragic. It was preventable. And it was incredibly stupid on all those kids in the Green Suburban and Jerry Ortiz's part. Incredibly terrible. But here, let's remember the big picture here. Jerry Ortiz wasn't held accountable. Okay, you are holding Oscar Martinez accountable, and you should find him an appropriate punishment, a just punishment. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't mean to kill anybody. He didn't think he was gonna end up in this situation. But as adults, there are consequences in life. And we understand that. And that's what you're probably based your verdict on, going, somebody's got to be held accountable here. And by law, you know, you felt like he should be held accountable as a party. We understand that and respect it. But for punishment wise, we think we should be in that 5 to 10 year range. Okay? Think about the consequences of the other co-actors in this case. And of course, Enrique Bocanegra, tragic. Absolutely. And I feel for his family. And I think the Martinez family feels for his family as well. Nobody's, you know, blowing off Enrique Bocanegra at all. It's a terrible thing, but Oscar had a responsibility to not hang with that crowd. He did. You've held him accountable. Find him, give him that 5 to 10 year range. And I believe that's just. I believe that's appropriate given the facts and circumstances of this particular case. Thank you for your attention and paying attention to all the details in this particular trial.
State?
As I mentioned before, this trial was about responsibility. So far, you've held Oscar accountable. There's just one more step. Joshua got prison. Christopher Mejia got the ultimate sentence. He died. Doesn't matter what happens to the rest of them because Oscar was the only actual adult in that car. Not the fact that Oscar should have or could have. He definitely knew. By your own verdict, you found that he was responsible. His actions played a role leading up to Enrique Bocanegra's death. He has no one else to blame but himself. Now, murder, that's 5 to 99 years your life. Ag robbery, also first-degree felony, that's 5 to 99 years or life. These are two first-degree felonies that you have found Oscar guilty of. The decision you have is whether or not probation is appropriate. Oscar gets to live the rest of his life. He is only 21. Enrique never gets that opportunity. Enrique's family never gets that opportunity to have him there. Oscar's family eventually will get to see him. That's not the same for Enrique. It's not even the same for Chris. A life was taken that day that you have held him directly accountable. Question you have is how much does that merit punishment? If he played a direct role in it happening, if as the oldest, he knew more than what he wanted to let on to the police. The fact that Oscar, on some level, had an ability to stop what was happening. Judge gave you an example of a murder where it would be 5 years in Vordaer. Do you guys remember that? It was the example where it was a man euthanizing his dying wife. And Judge made a reference that said that was a 5-year murder. But what exactly is this? An innocent man minding his own business gets shot as the direct result of Oscar's actions? Of the fact that he created the situation where he lost his life? The defense asks you to be fair and equitable. That's what the state's asking for too. We're asking that you continue holding him responsible. That you continue making sure that what happened, he has to own up to it. Defense was right. We are going to ask you for a number. State's going to ask for 40 years in the Texas Department of Corrections. Oscar's actions directly led to the death of one individual who had nothing to do with any of this. You found that Oscar guilty on the fact that he started it through his ag robbery. Another person passed away. This is about holding someone responsible, holding them accountable. And that's what the state of Texas is asking you to do now by sentencing him to 40 years in the Texas Department of Corrections. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the deputy will take you back to the jury room. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.